This is like half a build log, half a cry for help. In the beginning of this year, when I was done with Trash Fox Boy over here, it was time to make a new project, and I was gripped by the idea that I really wanted to make something covered in blood. Thankfully, my current hyperfixation was very kind to provide me with a suitable, traumatized bisexual white boy who killed a bunch of people and never washed their blood off. There's a lot of stuff that I want to experiment with in this costume, so let's start with the things that have the least chance to go horribly wrong, and then we can go up from there. Oh boy, I bought exactly the amount I needed of this fabric and they don't have any left in the store, so I literally cannot fuck this up. If anything goes wrong, I'm screwed. Pants first, so I can lull myself into a false sense of security. I drafted this. I'm not gonna cover drafting in this video because this pattern took me 6 mockups. This costume has a lot of big monochrome areas, so I want to add like some visual interest to it. And one thing that I'm gonna do to start with is I'm gonna mark where the front crease is gonna be, because I'm actually gonna turn that into a seam. I traced the front pattern onto fresh paper, splitting it in 2 parts along the front crease line. Had to use a broomstick as a straight edge because nothing else was long enough. Drew the pocket and added seam allowance. Backside didn't have anything special, just added seam allowance. I usually do 1 centimeter seam allowance for almost everything, but I doubled that on the side seam and the new center front seam for felling. You'll see why in a second. I also cut a fly piece, which is just a rectangle as long as your zipper plus seam allowance, by 5 centimeters, and I sewed the back pocket shape from another pair of pants. The front pocket was drafted by tracing the corner of my front pattern and then completing the rectangle in the size I wanted. Also, no, I didn't forget the waistband. There's some things I need to do first. And now the fun part. Oh, my back hurts. Okay, look, come here, look at me, look into my eyes. I need you to understand how much I love this fabric. This is cotton twill, which you can recognize by the kind of diagonal pattern to the weave if you look closely. It's so nice to sew. It's like sewing with paper if sewing with paper was a good thing. Every time I make something out of this, I'm like, this sewing shit's easy. And then my next project comes around and the universe punishes my hubris by making me work with satin again, and I consider going into the river and joining the trout population. But yeah, cotton twill. Anytime you're making pants or shorts or jackets or anything that needs like a little bit of body to it, consider cotton twill. I have all of my pieces here, serged what had to be serged, so we can put this together. For the sake of the length of this video, I'm gonna keep the construction a little TLDR. I need to start by putting the halves of the front pieces together, so I'll show you how to do a flat felt seam. First, I drew a line 2 centimeters away from the edge of the fabric. That's the seam allowance I left on that edge. And then, since I want the seam to be a visible detail, I straight stitched it wrong sides together, so the seam allowances are on the outside like this. I'm not gonna repeat myself every single time, but every time you make a seam, remember that I am behind you, telling you to press it. Once pressed, you're going to carefully trim one side of that seam allowance down to about 0.5 centimeter, just enough to keep it from completely fraying. And then you're gonna fold the side you left intact twice, so all the raw edges are enclosed. Again, pressing helps a lot here. And then secure that folded edge down with a top stitch near the edge. That gives you a really strong seam that's finished on both sides. But the reason I decided to do it is that it's actually quite the visible seam, and I just like how it looks. I think it looks nice. I wasn't going to record this part, but I took the time to base the pants and try them on one last time, and I am glad I did, because look how much I had to take them in. And now that I know the actual size of these pants, I can, sew them. Back pockets were copied from another pair of pants. Serge, folded under, top stitched on. The front pockets are a little more involved. Inner pocket linings are usually cut from thinner fabric to reduce bulk with a patch top stitch on the visible part. You start by sewing the outer layer of the pocket to the pant leg, right sides together around the opening edge. Turn that seam inside out and top stitch. Then you fold it back so it's arranged correctly again, close at the bottom, and run a straight stitch around the edges to secure everything together. This is a stitch that's supposed to be hidden inside the seam allowance, so it has to run closer to the edge than it normally would. And now you can treat the whole pant leg as one piece. Now to actually put the parts together, I flat felled the outside leg seams the same way I did the front. The crotch and the inner legs on a pair of pants need to be strong seams, especially the crotch. but you can flat file both the inside and outside seams because you can't run that through the machine. So triple spray stitch, my beloved. This is incidentally how jeans are constructed, and they are constructed this way for durability, which is also my goal here. I skipped recording the fly installation, but this here is how I install all of my pant flies. I had to stop real quick and get the camera because look at this. How do you even do that? For the waistband, you first sew the two layers wrong sides together right along the edge of the interfacing, but without getting the interfacing in the seam if you can. I opted to have the interface layer on the outside, so I attached the inner layer of the waistband to the edge of the pants, right side of the waistband to the inside of the pants, so the seam allowance ends up folded inside the waistband. I have ink on my fingers, and I'm working with white fabric. Surely nothing will go wrong here. Then the other layer of the waistband gets its seam allowance folded under, so I can top stitch it down. Finished up the hems, just folded over twice, nothing fancy. And lastly, the buttons. My machine has a one-step buttonhole attachment, but it was struggling a lot with something as thick as a full waistband, so I had a zigzag stitch and a dream. It didn't come out super clean, but it does its job, and there'll be a belt over it anyway, so whatever. I did crop them shorter, and they're also a little tight on the calf, but that's on purpose, so it's less bulk under my armor later. Okay, that's the biggest moth I have ever seen in my life. How did you get in here? Are you for real right now? So now I can move on to the shirt. It is mostly a normal dress shirt. It just has a really tall collar, and also I don't really like how most of the rec dress shirts fit me, so I'm patterning my own. This is a work in progress. And for that, I got this. This is cotton batiste. It is 100% cotton, and it's also really fine cotton batiste. It might end up being too sheer. We're gonna find out. I have most of a working mock-up here. This is a retail pattern. This is from Bootstrap Fashions. I altered it to fit a little bit better. It has princess seams on the back because my tops usually need those. At some point I might make a video on how I alter retail patterns to fit me, but that would have to be a dedicated video for that. Anyway. There's one alteration that I have to do to this, and that is the collar. The way it is right now, you have the collar stand. This is have the collar stand. It goes on the neckline. Can you say, please? Thank you. And then you attach the collar on top of it, so it lays flat. It kind of lays down like this. I don't want it to do that. I want it to actually stand up. So I can just make the stand wider, and that would work. But if you look at it, the collar doesn't go all the way to the end of the stand. There's this little piece on the end here, and that's this part. That's the part that buttons on the neck. And if I just make this wider, this part is also going to be really tall, and I don't think I like that, but I think I have an idea. I did make it taller, but kept the little button tab the same height. Kind of a weird shape, but it's actually how it's drawn in the splash art, even though I doubt that was the artist's intention. This is actually really nice. Look at this. I was pretty happy with the colors, so I drafted the front details directly on the mockup and moved on to finish up the pattern. All the fit adjustments I needed are already in the mockup, but now I split the back to have a shoulder yoke, got rid of the center back seam altogether, and cleaned up whatever needed cleaning up. Oh crap, I need one more of this. Ayo. I moved my light back there. Does it blow the white a little bit less than it was before? I have all the parts here. I want to show you real quick what I did for interfacing. The collar and the collar stand got a double layer of interfacing. The back yoke got a layer of thin interfacing. This is not really something that's done in retail shirts, but this fabric is so fine that I was a little worried about it distorting over the shoulders, so just a little bit of light interfacing to stabilize it. The front halves on both sides got a strip of interfacing along the placket, so it just turns over like this. And the front yokes also got the same thin interfacing as the back yoke. Not really for stabilization, but because since the edges are going to be turned over, they were really visible underneath the fabric without the interfacing, so I just added a thin layer for that. To start with, I folded and pressed the edges of the front details, which the interfacing really helped with, so I could top stitch them to the fronts. So on most shirts, plackets are folded to the inside instead of the outside because that makes for a cleaner finish on the outside. But for the shirt specifically, I need something to hide the raw edge of this yoke here. So I opted to fold my plackets outwards instead of inwards to have something to cover that raw edge. For the shoulder seams, you put the layers of the yoke right sides together, and then you slide the front in between them, facing the outside, so it lays correctly when you open up the seam after. And then I top stitched the shoulder seam like pretty much everything in this costume. Folded the tiniest of box pleats at the center back so I could attach the yoke to the back. That little pleat is there to give just a bit more room for arm movement without having to alter the fit of the shirt. I attached the inner layer of the yoke to the center back first and used the outer layer of the yoke to enclose the seam allowances inside. The rest of the body and the sleeves were assembled normally, just sew, serge, and press. My studio is a mess and my allergies are trying to kill me today, so that's cool. I got the sleeves attached last night. I need to work on the collar now, but I bit the bullet and I finally ordered a tailor's pressing board, so I want to wait for that to arrive before I do that. Until then, I'm just gonna get the shirt finished like from here down. I need to hem the bottom, finish the sleeves, and also get started on the buttonholes. The hem and the ends of the sleeves all got quickly serged, folded once, then top stitched down. I chose not to make cuffs for this shirt, because the sleeves will be tucked into armor and I'm just trying to avoid bulk whatever I can. I'm seriously never doing a buttonhole by machine ever again. I am retiring the buttonhole setting on my machine forever. Like, look at this. Look at the difference between this. This is a mess and it's all stretched out already. Versus this. This is so much cleaner. I'm actually gonna go back and refinish these buttonholes by hand, see if they look a little better, and I am never doing a buttonhole by machine ever again. It's been a few days. I've been working on the side on the coat back here, but my tailor's board is finally here. So let me show you real quick what this is for. When you have a seam right on the edge like this, your first instinct is to just fold it and press it while folded, the way it's going to sit, and that's fine, that works, but that's not going to be quite as crisp as it could possibly be. If you really want a crisp finish, you want to press it open first, and then fold it and press it down again. But you can't really do that with a collar, like normally. You can't, like, you have a really tight corner here, you can't really open this and get your iron in here. So this is where the pressing board helps. So as you can see, it has a bunch of shapes and curves that you can match to the shape of your seam. For the side of the collar, we're gonna use this point right here. So you take your piece, you open your seam, and you slide it over the appropriate part. And then you can press it nice and crisp. Then you can go ahead and press them folded, and that's how you get those really nice, professional looking, really crisp edges. I don't have a lot of footage of me attaching the collar because I did it kind of wrong, and I'll revisit it in another dress shirt product in the future, but it was essentially just folding and top stitching the collar stand to the collar and then the collar stand to the neckline. Shirt! I can actually, like, rest my head on the collar. That's kind of insane. I should have given myself a little more room on the shoulders, but the thing is, the last time I made myself a shirt was before I transitioned, and I gained an inch on each shoulder. And yeah, of course, like, I measured my shoulders when I was making the shirt, but like, I looked at the pieces, I looked at the pattern, I was like, this looks too big. And of course, my gut feeling is more trustworthy than the numerical measurement I took for some reason. Anyway, Coat's gonna go over it, it's fine. Couple accessories before we move to the next piece. I 3D printed these. They've been 3D printed in resin, and they're supposed to be brooches, like here. I guess this video isn't gonna do so well after all, because I just broke my thumbnails. I wanted to embed a brooch back into them, so I printed them with a slot in the back, which ended up being a little too shallow, and I had to dig it deeper with a Dremel, but that was an easy fix. I super glued the pins in place temporarily. That was just to keep them in place as I filled the slots with more resin. I do not trust super glue, and neither should you. Originally, the plan was to use gold foil for the stars because I wanted it to match some of the metal hardware that's going on the costume later, but mirror finishes are pretty finicky and I couldn't get it smooth enough to my liking. So I went back to the old faithful, metallic wax, which many of you know as rub and buff. I don't use it often because I'm impatient as fuck, but this time I took the time to really buff it, and I bit my tongue because, yeah, you can get it really shiny. It does rub off if you don't seal it though, so I sealed it with this. This is marketed as clear shellac here, but it's actually a PVA polymer-based sealant, and I like it because unlike most other clear finishes, it preserves the metallic shine of the wax pretty well. I also made this for the shirt out of 3 tubes of some leftover lining fabric and some batting, which I then braided, broke a needle trying to sew the ends shut, and capped with these alligator clips. The coat. So, my boy Sinclair thinks it makes him look cooler to wear his coat over his shoulders, and unfortunately he is correct, but that does cause me a problem. That problem being that when you take a jacket that's the right size for you, and you try to wear it like that, it looks a little frumpy. It was not made to sit like this. And most importantly, if you do literally anything with your arms, yeah, this one sits a little bit better because it's very structured up here. But still, as soon as I let go of the lapels, it's just... So, with that in mind, before I started doing anything for this costume, I made this. I call it my reverse binder. Basically, it serves me 2 purposes. One of them gives me a little chest padding so the shirt sits a little nicer. And second, more importantly, there are 5 magnets inside each of the shoulder pads, and the entire shoulder pad just comes off for washing. So I wear this under the shirt, and these are the shoulder pads that are going in the coat. They have the matching magnets right here. So the coat can then snap onto my reverse binder through the shirt and stay in place. Hopefully that works the way I expect it to. So I got a pattern from Julie Chantal Designs on Etsy that was originally intended to be a Percy the Rollo coat. I chose it mostly because it is a coat that is drafted to be worn open, so the fronts are like really narrow, it doesn't close all the way, and I think that's gonna make it sit better the way I need it to. It's a really big pattern. I think it was like 70 pages to print, but it fit me perfectly right off the printer. That was really cool. But unfortunately, I am not gonna be wearing it correctly, so I did need to make some pretty major adjustments. This is my second mock-up. It looks really bubbly because I can't press this fabric, and as usual, it's too small for the mannequin, but you can have an idea. So I changed the collar into a notch collar and lapel, and I also took about 2 inches more or less here vertically from the back, so like this direction, because specifically when I put it on my shoulders, there was a lot of extra fabric on the back, so I got rid of that. But that does mean that I had to redraft the entirety of the sleeve head. And since I was already doing that, I also made the sleeves straight, because jackets like these, they usually have curved sleeves, because your arms are not actually straight. But since this is just going to be hanging out, I thought it was going to hang a little smoother if it was straight. So, we have a problem. This front part is already over where it's been cut out, and there's not enough for the sleeves anyway. But the problem is, I bought this fabric a year ago. If anything goes wrong, I'm screwed. And I already made the pants, so if I can't find this fabric, I have to make the pants again. 7 fabric stores later. 8 fabric stores later. The coat doesn't fit on my cutting table, so welcome to my dining room. It's 3:43 in the morning. I'm exhausted, but somehow, by some miracle, I managed to fit everything on the original fabric. Because I was not cutting the fold. So I was able to save enough fabric that way that I was able to get everything on this fabric, and there's enough for the sleeves over there. But yeah, I'm tired. This is heavy. All the long body seams were flat-felled, which definitely added a lot of sewing time to the project, but I am nothing if not committed to the aesthetic. And you may notice, this is the front, this is the side. The side's a little bit longer than the front. In the case of this pattern, it's 3 centimeters longer. And that's for later when we attach the lining. Notice that the 2 layers of the front just attach to each other around the edge here. but the side needs to be a little bit longer so it can fold over the edge here and attach to the lining inside. Then assembling the sleeves before I lose track of the little pieces. The yellow stripe is the same fabric, just dyed. In the piss bath you go! The sleeves got flat felt seams on the front and normal straight seams on the back. Also, my outer sleeve is 2 centimeters longer than the lining, plus 1 centimeter seam allowance makes 3 centimeters, which is by how much I folded the edge inwards. Attaching them was pretty annoying. Sleeves are always annoying, but the super heavy interfacing I used was not helping. So when a daddy shoulder pad loves a mommy shoulder pad very much, I have a confession to make. I ripped all the interfacing out. So I made a choice to use heavier interfacing than the pattern actually called for. Like, the pattern called for maybe 100 grams, maybe 80 because my fabric's really thick, and I used 140. I did that because I was really worried about the coat, like, holding its shape, keeping its shape with the way I'm gonna wear it and everything, and etc. And it worked, don't get me wrong, it worked the way I wanted it to. It did keep its shape very well. The problem is, the thicker and stiffer your fabric and interfacing combo gets, the more easily it's gonna wrinkle, and the harder it's gonna get to press those wrinkles out. And since I'm manipulating the coat a lot because I'm in the process of making it, I ended up with a bunch of like really stubborn crinkling, especially but not exclusively around the arm size, and that was getting more and more impossible to remove. This is also why I kept burning the interfacing, because the wrinkles were so stubborn that the interfacing literally could not take the heat necessary to smoothen them out. Fabric was fine though, because cotton is great, and this isn't even serge, this is denim. But it did pose a problem later because I will need to press this coat after it's done. And if the interfacing can't take the heat, what about the lining? The lining is satin. So yeah, I couldn't sleep. It was 6:40 something in the morning and I was really annoyed by this entire situation, so I just ripped it out. You can rip fusible interfacing out of fabric as demonstrated. It takes a lot of heat, a lot of patience. I definitely would not recommend it for any kind of light or even medium weight fabric. My coat was fine because, again, it's denim, it doesn't care. But still, maybe get it right the first time. And then came the harrowing prospect of putting new interfacing into a garment that's already sewn. Because, like, I couldn't unpick the front panels, put the interfacing on, and sew them back on, because these are flat felt seams. Some of these sides don't have seam allowance anymore because it was cut out in the process of making the seam. So yeah, I did recut the front linings though. I didn't hate myself quite that much. This looks so much better already. This is 80 gram interfacing, if I remember correctly, and I would not have gone any higher than 80 in the first place if I wasn't worried about something else that ended up not being a problem. I also hand sewed the sleeve caps in. They're a normal fixture in this kind of jacket. They just help the top of the sleeve keep its shape a little better. Normally, they're just a single layer of felt. I did two because I wanted a little more padding, and they're just hand sewn in to the seam allowance. The fix came out surprisingly clean actually, but even if it hadn't, all of my sins will be hidden forever by the lining. Which, speaking of, only took a fraction of the time to assemble since it was normal straight seams instead of my flat felling nonsense. I did top stitch over the side front seam though, because it's connecting to wildly different fabric weights, and it could use the extra help. Before there's a bunch of things in the way, this is a good time to attach the pocket to the lining. This is gonna be a single weld pocket. I already have my pieces here. You should have one pocket trim piece, mine's already folded, and 2 layers for the pocket itself. One of them's a little longer than the other, but they're the same width. And I also went ahead and marked the opening line for the pocket on the right side of the lining. Take your trim with the fold pointing down and place it against the line right here. There's a little extra on both sides as a seam allowance. If you were making a double weld pocket, you would have a second trim piece and you would place it above like this, so you would end up with like 1 and 2. But this is single weld, so we just have the one. Then you take the shorter side of the pocket bag, right sides together, and you place it here on top of the trim. And you run a seam from here to here, respecting the seam allowance on either side. Take the other side of the pocket bag, the longer side, and place it above the other one like this, also right sides together, so the sides form straight lines like this. Then you're gonna do the same thing as you did below, and you're gonna sew from here to here, still respecting the seam allowances on both sides. If you fold the seam allowances back a little bit here, you can see the line you drew earlier. You're gonna cut along this line now, except when you get close to the end of the seam here, you're gonna cut a bit of a Y shape. After you push everything through the hole, you should get something more or less like this. Now you're gonna top stitch the bottom of the welt from here to here, although make sure when you do that you're only catching this side of the pocket, not this side. Otherwise you're gonna sew your pocket closed. Then on the inside, we can flip this down and close the bag. To wrap it up, you're gonna want to make sure the little tabs on the sides are tucked in nicely. Then you're gonna top stitch down the sides of the welt. This time, it is going to catch both layers of the pocket. So now we have the shell and the two halves of the lining. Importantly, I did not close the center back on the lining yet. So with the shell right side out and the lining inside out, so they're right sides together, you take the lining and you match it to the front piece of the shell, matching the edges, and then sew from the tip of the lapel to the hem. A mistake people make really often when it comes to sleeve linings is they try to turn the whole thing inside out like I did here, and then they pull the sleeve lining through the sleeve proper, and they try to sew around like this. Don't do that. If you do that, you are not going to be able to turn that inside out. You're gonna have to unpick it and do it the right way. Why doesn't that work? If I were to pull this right side out again, you see how the sleeve lining is going inside the actual sleeve here. So if I were to pull both things out like this, what's actually going to happen is you're going to end up with a tube of fabric like this, forming a ring. So what's the right way? This is the wrong side of both the shell and the lining. You can see all the seam allowances here. You're gonna pull both sleeves, the outside and the lining, to this side of the coat. Let me pull this inside out too. And you're gonna connect them, opening to opening, like this. And you're gonna sew around right sides together. The ring of fabric that I showed you on the other side, if you try to connect the two parts of the sleeve the other way, you want the ring of fabric, but you want it on this side. Because that way, when you push the whole thing through, when you turn it inside out, you get a fully lined sleeve on the other side. It's starting to look like something. The center back seam on the lining that we left open before, we're gonna close it now, but we need to connect it around the rest of the coat. So you're gonna take both halves of the lining and we're gonna connect them like this. All the way down the back, right sides together, with the entire coat on the inside. I assembled the collar off screen. This is going to be a notch lapel, and the way this works is, you see these angles on the neckline? The actual neckline of the coat is from here to like here. So the neckline edge, so from one corner to the other, is what gets attached to the bottom edge of the collar stand. And then from like here to here-ish on the lapel gets sewn to this edge of the collar. But let's do it one thing at a time. Just really make sure not to sew past the seam allowance here. This is why I marked it with a heat erase pen. With the stand attached to the neckline on both sides, we now have the side of the collar and the top of the lapel open like this. This corner that I pointed out earlier, you're gonna take a pair of scissors and you're gonna clip the seam allowance just on the coat itself. Don't clip the color stand, but you're gonna clip the seam allowance right up to where you finished the seam before. With the seam allowance clipped, you can turn the fabric like this. So it's gonna open like this. And you sew from here, to the side of the collar. And with this sewn, this last hole closes up like this. Collar to collar, lapel to lapel. Out of all like the individual garments that I've made, I think this is the one that took the longest, and brother, I am feeling it. This is my last chance to install the shoulder pads, so let's turn it inside out one more time and whip stitch these bad boys to the seam allowance at the shoulders. I left them for less because they're so thick and the magnets catch on the sewing machine, and they would have made attaching the collar a nightmare if they'd already been in place. I want to do that kind of fancy suit jacket bottom edge that looks like this. You've seen it before for sure. Basically, you have a seam on the edge here on the front pieces, but on the other pieces, the outer fabric actually folds to the inside and attaches to the lining on the inside, and you have a bit of a fold here. It is a little finicky, but it's not as complicated as it may seem at first glance. One of the annoying parts of working with white fabric is that I have to adjust the ISO on my camera for literally every take. The coat was patterned for this kind of lining. You can see here the fronts, the outer front and the front lining. They're the same size, they're the same length, but the rest of the shell is quite a bit longer than the lining. So step 1, sew the fronts together with the seam allowance open. Now, remember how this wasn't sewn all the way down? This is so we can, now that this part's attached, we can pull the lining down like this and match it to the edge of the outer fabric. Match the two hems, and then sew all the way. Originally, I was gonna leave like an opening somewhere on the hem, so I could like turn everything inside out later, but I am not in the mood for hand sewing, so I actually picked like 20 centimeters off the center back on the lining, and I'm gonna use that to turn it around, so I'm just gonna sew a continuous seam from one end to the other. And then this is not a necessary step for this kind of lining, but I was worried about the fake blood later stiffening the fabric and making it hang weird, so I whip stitched that lining lip down. The hour of truth. Okay, it feels reliable. Oh god. I'm going to admit that I was only like 60% sure that this was going to work. Ah, this looks so cool! Ah! I'm really happy with how this came out, but we're not done yet. You see this coat? This beautiful white coat that took me 2 months to make? Well, my friends, it is time to cover it in blood! First order of business, I am not using paint for this, especially not fabric paint. I don't like the texture of fabric paint, and it's really unconvincing because it looks like, well, paint. Real blood doesn't sit on top of the fabric like paint would. It gets absorbed, stains the fibers, and mostly keeps the texture of the fabric. It's also matte. Listen, I was assigned female at birth. I know what blood stains look like on fabric. Let me have this, okay? So, if I don't want to use paint and dyes aren't really opaque enough for this, I bought ink. This is middle school grade India ink. I just got the cheapest I could find because I'm going to need a lot of it. I got a box of red, and I also got one black, one blue to mix different shades. I made a little test sample here, and I am really happy with this. India ink is theoretically waterproof on fabric after it's thoroughly dry, but I don't want to risk it, so this costume will be dry clean only. And with that, let's have some fun! This is so scary. Oh my god. Ah! Also, my printer's out of ink, so this is the reference I have to work with. Trust the process, am I right? I took the gloves off and I'm already regretting it. I'm so happy! I'm out of red ink, I need to order more, but I am really excited with how this is coming out. Surely this will be enough ink. Right? When I was a teenager, my friends used to play a game in which they'd put down a ketchup sachet on the table and they'd take turns like slapping it, like to try and get it to blow up on the other person's face. And I understand that now. You see this part here where I miscalculated the length of the trim I needed for this?
No, you don't.
Needless to say, I was having fun. And also, India ink smells kinda bad. But hey, let me show you how it all came out. This marks about half of the costume finished, though time-wise that's more like 80%. Sewing takes a long time, you guys. I'm very happy with all of this. I actually haven't been this satisfied with the costume in a while. But we are approaching the 40-minute mark in this video, so I will leave you here and come back in the next video to bring you the armor, the halberd, the wig, and whatever else is still missing. Stay tuned. I've been cosplaying for 16 years, but as you've probably noticed, this is my first YouTube video. So if you enjoyed this vlog and you want to see the final product, because there's still a lot more to do, oh god, I'm gonna say it, then like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.